So what is Fleet Week and why is it important? Well, Fleet Week is a U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard annual tradition in which recently deployed ships overseas port at various major U.S. cities across the United States. Every year it's hosted in San Francisco, California, and New York City, New York. But this year, it's also hosted here in Miami, Florida. It allows the recently deployed service members to go out and experience the local cultures. It allows the civilians of the city in which they're in to go and learn about maritime operations. It allows them to go and do a ship tour. It allows them to go and see aerial demonstrations, sometimes by the Blue Angels, and also see live performances. It allows them to learn about the military, the Marines, the Navy, and the Coast Guard, and ultimately involve in community relations and show their support for the military.
Fleet Week was different this year. Normally, New York Fleet Week, it's around Memorial Day weekend. Ships in the harbor, sailors in uniform, tourists taking pictures, and bars are filling up. Old veterans walking around with that look in their eye like, yeah, I remember being that young and that fucking dumb. But this year, New York did it differently because of America's 250th birthday. They moved the whole thing to July and folded it into that big blowout in the harbor. All ships, gray hulls, Blue Angels, half the navies on the planet parked in New York Harbor at the same time. It already came and went. The ships are gone. The sailors are back on board. Somebody has already been to captain's mast over it. And when I read about it, it hit me. Not politically, not historically, personally. Because the second I saw Fleet Week New York, my brain opened a locked door that probably should have stayed locked. And suddenly I was right back there, 25 years old, wearing dress whites in New York City. Like that was a goddamn smart idea. And if you were ever in the Navy, you know dress whites are not a uniform. Dress whites are a dare. The Navy handing you bright white fabric and saying, wear this through a dirty ass city around beer, food, smoke, and bad decisions, and try not to look like you lost a fight with a hot dog cart. Welcome back to Olde Salty Bastards, the show. I'm Tug, and today we are talking about Fleet Week. Not the brochure version, not the come tour the ship and meet the professional sailors version. No, the real Fleet Week, where nobody would let us buy a beer, where we ended up in a VIP room at the strip club with a guy whose real name we were smart enough not to ask. Where we got treated better in New York City than we ever got treated in Norfolk. Where a bunch of sailors walked into an old church and it turned out to be a techno rave. And yes, that sentence is exactly as stupid as it fucking sounds. Today's episode, there's Fleet Week, and then there's Fleet Week. Or maybe the better title is, how the hell did we make it back to the ship? Let's get salty. Now, here's the thing about Fleet Week. It's not just an event. It's actually a stress test, not for the city, for the sailors. You take young men and women who've been trapped in steel, sleeping in burden, eating galley food, standing watch, smelling the same damn fucking people every day. Then you drop the brow in New York City and say, go have fun, but don't embarrass the Navy. That is not a liberty policy. That is a dare, because sailors don't ease into liberty. We explode into it. Like somebody opened the cage at the zoo and said, try not to bite anybody. And New York treated us like we mattered. Norfolk treats sailors like background noise. Norfolk looked at a group of sailors walking down the street and thought, great, these assholes again. New York looked at us and said, thank you for your service. Let me buy you a beer. And buddy, that is dangerous, because a young sailor being thanked, bought drinks, and treated like a celebrity is about 2 compliments away from believing he is handsome. And most of us were not handsome. We were young, dumb as hell, in uniform, and too stupid to know attention and good judgment don't always travel together. That was Fleet Week. Patriotism in the daylight, 4 fucking decisions after dark. Now, the Fleet Week, we had what we called Cinderella Liberty. For the civilians, that meant you better have your ass back on before midnight, or your ass was going to turn into a pumpkin. You go out, you can enjoy the city, but when the clock struck 12, you better not still be standing in some club telling a woman named Crystal that you might come back later. No, you won't. Your dumbass belongs to the Navy, and the Navy did not care how good the party was. The Navy cared that you were accounted for in the morning. And if you missed muster, man, your ass was grass and the chief was the lawnmower. Now, in my group, I happen to be the senior guy, which should not make me an adult. Let's not get carried away. I was still young. I was still capable of decisions that would have made the current me pour a stiff goddamn drink. But I was senior enough to know one thing. Somebody had to watch the clock. Somebody had to make sure we did not lose a guy. Somebody had to be just sober enough to recognize when the night was about to come paperwork. And a group of sailors, oh, sober does not mean sober. It means least likely to lick a stripper pole. So that was me, the designated responsible idiot. And every Liberty group needs one, because if you send 10 sailors into New York City and nobody is watching the clock, you are not on Liberty. You are pre-writing accounts on shit. Oh, and one more detail. We were not in those damn dungarees. We were in dress whites, which made the whole story even dumber, because every sailor knows you can't put on dress whites, stand perfectly still in an empty room, and you were going to still end up with a stain. We were wearing them in the bars and the clubs, in the subway and the strip club at night in New York City. That alone should have counted as hazardous fucking duty pay. One of the first things I remember was that no one would let us buy a beer. I mean, nobody. We'd walk into a place, reach for our money, and somebody would say, no, 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 I got these guys. And at first it was great. Then it got dangerous, because when you pay for your own beers, your wallet is your conscience. Your wallet says, hey, dumbass, maybe slow down. But when strangers are buying, there are no breaks. The only thing stopping you is your maturity. And we had none. We had hormones and bad judgment and not a goddamn ounce of self-control. That's not maturity. That's a hostage situation. Then we walked into a place called the Pure Platinum. And suddenly, the beers were $7 each. Back then, $7 for a beer felt like robbery. Today, that's probably 25 fucking dollars when you add inflation, New York prices, and you're in a strip club dummy surcharge. So we sat around the main stage, young sailors in dress whites, eyes wide open, trying to act cool, trying not to look like we just discovered fire. The waitress brought us beers, and she said, that's $7 each. I looked at the guys and said, enjoy this one, boys, because we cannot afford to drink here. That was the truth. We had enough money to get into trouble, not enough to sustain it. There's a difference. One beer, look around, and then back in the streets like broke-ass sailors with dreams. But then I looked up, and there was a VIP area. And up there was a guy in a three-piece suit. Calm, not loud, not flashy, just standing there like he owned oxygen. And he waved. Not like a drunk guy waves, like a man who's used to people coming when he just moves one finger. So me and one of my shipmates went up to check it out. And another guy met us and said, Mr. Johnson would like to invite you up to the VIP room. Now, we called him Mr. Johnson because we did not want to know his real name. There are questions young sailors should not ask. What do you do for a living? Why does everyone seem scared of you? Why are there three guys behind you who've never smiled in their lives? No, no, no. You smile, you say thank you. And if you're smart, you bring your people with you. So I told the guy, I'll be right back. I got to go get my shipmates. And I went and collected the other 8, because you do not leave your guys behind. You came out together. You go to the VIP room together. So we marched back up, all 10 of us in dress whites, looking squared away from a distance and completely unqualified up close. The guy looked at me and said, man, you motherfuckers reproduce quicker than rabbits. I laughed and I said, you have to stick together, and that's no joke. That was Liberty survival, because nothing good happens when one sailor wanders off alone with a story that starts, I'll catch up with you guys later. No, you won't. We'll find you tomorrow wearing someone else's jacket and eating pizza in Queens. So we get up to the VIP area, and our night changed completely. 5 minutes earlier, we were broke ass sailors nursing one $7 beer, like it was a family heirloom or something. Now we were upstairs in the VIP room with him. Surf and turf showed up, cigars showed up, drinks showed up, dancers everywhere. And we were sitting there like, what the hell just happened? That was Fleet Week. 1 minute you're calculating whether you can afford another beer. The next you're in a VIP room with a man whose real name you intentionally do not know. You did steak like you belong there, and we did not belong there. That's what made it magical. We were smoking and joking and watching the show, trying not to look like amateurs, but we were amateurs because young sailors are terrible at pretending. They've been there somewhere before, every one of us thinking, this is the greatest night of my life. And then a non-zero chance, I end up buried on a giant stadium. And we were doing all of it in just whites. One drop of steak juice, one cigar ash, and we were done. Somehow those whites survived. I still don't fucking know how. Now, one of my shipmates loved all things mafia, movies, stories, the whole mystique. So, of course, because sailors cannot leave well enough alone, he started asking questions. And at one point, he asked one of the guys, do you know John Gotti? And the guy didn't even blink. He just said, yeah, he's a fucking pussy. And I'm going to laugh because what else are you going to do? Challenge him? No. You laugh, you nod, you take another puff of your cigar and quietly decide that this man's opinion of John Gotti is probably based on more personal data set than yours. And here's the thing. Nobody threatened us. Nobody messed with us. They treated us like honored guests, like the uniform meant something. And for a bunch of young sailors, that hit hard. And one guy asked, so what's it like being in the Navy? And one of the shipmates said, it's like being in prison. Every sailor knows what he meant. You live in a metal box. You sleep in a rack. You eat when they tell you. You work when they tell you. People count on you. People inspect you. People tell you where to be, what to wear, and when you're allowed to leave. So my shipmates started explaining all this, and we were all laughing and giggling. And then one of the guys laughed too and said, yeah, I know what prison's like. Then he lifted his pants leg just enough to show what looked like an ankle monitor. And I remember thinking, well, shit, we have officially reached the part of the evening where the room is telling us things we should not repeat. That's when the responsible idiot in me woke up a little bit, not all the way, but just enough, because when a man in a VIP room casually reveals prison experience and ankle jewelry, you don't need a chief to tell you to stay polite. You say, thank you, enjoy the steak, and you keep you guys from asking follow-up questions. And you start paying attention to the exits. At some point, I hear one of the guys say, bring the car around. He's going to be leaving soon. And I thought, okay, this is our cue, because when a man like that leaves, you don't overstay your welcome. You don't ask, where is he going? You do not ask if you can come. You just say thank you and get the hell out gracefully. So I huddled up my shipmates and I said, he's leaving soon. You need to show him some appreciation. Now here's the question. What do you give a guy who's obviously has everything? Money? No, that's embarrassing. A drink? He has a room full of drinks. A handshake? Too little. But what we had was better. One of the ship's brass Zippo lighters. And if you know, you know. Those things were hard to get. They meant something. It wasn't just a lighter. It was a piece of the ship. Something you didn't just hand out to just anyone. So we gave him this ship's brass Zippo. And when we explained what it was, you would have thought we handed him a gold bar. His whole demeanor changed. Not fake, not polite, actually touched by it. And that stuck with me. There's a guy surrounded by money, dancers, cigars, steak, people doing things for him. And a little brass ship's lighter from a bunch of young sailors meant something to him. Maybe because it was real. Maybe because you just couldn't buy it. Maybe because all the weirdness of that night, respect went both ways. We shook everyone's hand, thanked them, and headed out the door to our next adventure, because apparently we're living in a fever dream. It was an old church converted into a techno club. Now, This part still sounds fake, but every sailor has one true story that sounds fake. That's the beauty of liberty. The truth often sounds like bad writing. So we left the VIP room, fed, smelling cigars, still in our dress whites, still somehow clean, and we ended up at a place called the Limelight.
The Lost Nightclubs of New York City. The Limelight is probably one of the most iconic nightclubs in the city back in the 80s and 90s. Now, it first opened up in 1983 by Peter Gatien. He operated a number of nightclubs throughout the world, and he transformed the inside of this church, creating labyrinths of stairways and hallways, and I can't forget to mention the shampoo room. A number of celebrities partied at the club, including Madonna, and the Beastie Boys even got their start here. But the people that everyone was talking about were the club kids. The club kids were famous for wearing over-the-top outfits and partied the night away. Now, the head of the group, Michael Alling, was convicted of murdering and dismembering fellow club kid Angel Melendez. That's when Limelight kinda went downhill. It was eventually renamed the Avalon, but permanently closed in 2007.
Bass was pounding, lights were flashing, people dancing with glow sticks, stained glass looking down like I'm disappointed, but also impressed. I was standing there at the ripe old age of 25 thinking, this is some of the craziest shit I've ever seen. My shipmates were in heaven, beautiful women everywhere, attention everywhere, chaos everywhere. And I was like the senior guy, trying to have fun, while counting heads like a drunk goddamn shepherd. That's the burden of being the responsible idiot. You're in the middle of the craziest party you've ever seen, but part of your brain is still going, 1, 2, 3, 4. Where the hell is Martinez? And then there was the bathroom situation. That was the first time I ever saw women storming into the men's bathroom. Not to make a statement, because the line to the women's room was so fucking long. Fuck this, we're invading. And they did. Just stormed the men's room like Marines hitting a beach. And I remember one thing. I did not know you could fit 3 women into one bathroom stall, and apparently you can. Fleet Week is educational. Not academical, but educational. Then there was this one guy, and I will never forget this as long as I live. This dude was walking around in a banana hammock, a yellow feather boa, and a big ridiculous hat that looked like something your grandmother would be wearing in the garden. And he was not embarrassed, not even a little bit. He walked around like he owned the building. Confidence level, aircraft carrier. Outfit, felony peacock. And I remember looking at and thinking, this man has either figured life out completely or he's abandoned all connection to reality. Maybe both. That's what Fleet Week did. It put you in rooms your hometown could never have prepared you for. You think, I'm in the Navy. I have seen some shit. Then New York says, cute. Watch this. Now, while all this is happening, I was watching the clock because we had Cinderella Liberty, and Cinderella Liberty is a cruel mistress. At 10:30, everyone was having the time of their lives. At 11, girls were inviting us back to a party at their house. And that's when leadership became painful because every sailor in that group wanted to go. Hell, part of me wanted to go. But let's not rewrite history and pretend I was some monk of discipline. I still had bad ideas circulating in my bloodstream, but I knew the math. Girls at a party in New York plus sailors with Cinderella Liberty equals somebody's going to be missing muster, and somebody's getting restricted, and me explaining to the chief why I failed to bring back the herd. So at 11 o'clock, I said, all right, we got to wrap it up and get back to the ship. And immediately the whining started. But these girls invited us to a party. I know. They said we could come back with them. I know. This could be the best fucking night of our lives. I know. And then I said, but your ass will be in a sling tomorrow if you miss muster, because that is the truth. The party sounds great at 11 p.m. Restriction does not sound great at 0700. Standing in front of the chief with glitter on your dress whites and no explanation does not sound great. That's the part young sailors struggle with. Young sailors think the night is the whole story. Older sailors know the morning is part of the story too. The morning always shows up. The morning doesn't give a shit how good your night was. It still punches and on time, so we left. And I'm not going to lie, some of those guys were pissed. To them, I had just ruined the greatest possible ending. But the next morning, when everyone was accounted for, nobody in cuffs, nobody missing, nobody being hunted down by Shore Patrol, that decision looked a lot better. Sometimes leadership is not heroic. Sometimes leadership is being the asshole who says, no, we are leaving. And sometimes that saves everyone, not from death, not from disaster, but from paperwork. And in the Navy, paperwork can ruin your whole damn life. So here's the point, and I'll say it once. The best Liberty stories are the ones where you get close enough to chaos to remember it. Not so close it ruins your life. That's the whole game. Fleet Week should be fun. Go out, see the city, dance badly, eat something you can't pronounce, get lost just enough to have a story, but don't be the guy. Every sailor knows the guy. The dumbass who can't hold his fucking liquor, the guy who mouths off to the cops, the guy who disappears, and the guy who gets everyone recalled. The guy whose name becomes a new rule. Don't be that guy, because there's a difference between a wild sea story and being a liability. Wild sea story ends with, man, we were young and dumb. Being a liability ends with, report to the chief. Different energy. So if you were a young sailor in New York this month and you're back aboard right now with a sunburn, an empty wallet, and a headache you're still nursing, listen to the Old Salty Bastard for a second. I hope you had fun. I hope you wore the uniform right. I hope you shook hands and let people thank you. If you kept your people together, watch the clock. You got everyone back on board that brow on time. Then you already had the hard part. And you didn't even know it was the hard part. Because one day, you stop being the young sailor in the story and you become the old salty bastard telling it. You stop chasing the night and you start watching the clock. You stop saying, come on, we've got time. And you start saying, nope, Cinderella Liberty. We're leaving. That's how it works. Every generation of sailors gets its own Fleet Week. Its own guy in a three-piece suit, its own long subway, its own party that wisely walked away from. Its own story that starts with, you're not going to believe this shit, and ends with, somehow we made it back. This year, the whole thing moved to July, tied up in the country's 250th birthday. Happy birthday, America. More ships in that harbor than most of us will ever see in one place. Different month, different flags, same city, same sailors, same dumb decisions. And somehow we made it back in dress whites. Clean. That still might be most unbelievable part of the whole damn story. Not the mafia-looking guy, not the VIP room, not the old church rave, not the banana hammock guy and the yellow feather boa. The fact that a bunch of sailors went out through all of that in dress whites and came back without looking like we rolled through a dumpster fire. That was the miracle. So every sailor was just came off the pier. I hope you had fun. I hope you represented it. And I hope to God you came back on time, because the party might have been amazing, but Captain's Mast has terrible lighting. That's it for today's episode of Olde Salty Bastards' show. I'm Tug. Send me your Fleet Week stories this year or ones from 30 years ago. I don't care. The wild ones, the funny ones, the ones you can legally talk about. Change the names, protect the guilty. We were young once, we were dumb once. Hell, some of us are still dumb, but somehow we survive. This is Tug. Stay salty, you magnificent bastards.